Welcome back to Let's Talk. I'm Sharaad Kuttan. My guest today, Baptist Coelho. He is an artist from India, but he's currently attached to the Center of Contemporary Art at NTU in Singapore. That's the CCA in Singapore. Now I'm going to read something from his art, one of his artist statement, and it says, "Multi-layered aspects of people and places form the foundation of my practice that extends beyond the studio. My focus has been to articulate unspoken stories and to conjure meaning from psychological and physical disruptions caused by war." Has your entire body of work been about war, thinking about war and its ramifications, and trying to kind of produce the materiality of war through your work?
Yeah. I think it didn't just start off from day one. I mean, when I came back to Mumbai, I was sort of looking at various, I thought I could say everything on anything and everything, and I was almost talking about my immediate neighbor, to the environment, to the buildings around me, the urban scape of Mumbai, to gender, to family, etc. I was almost having a voice on everything, because I thought, I guess, as an artist, I can say something, and I can in some way confront, resolve, or all that. And within that spectrum of 2 or 3 years of looking at various aspects, that's when I sort of started to look at also, I was responding to a call for, it was called the Peace Project. It was a call by a museum in the US, and every artist around the world could respond. And that's when I chose to respond to something called the Siachen Glacier conflict, which is something so synonymous with the Indian partition of 1947, and then this glacier conflict starts in 1984 when the two countries starting to claim that they own the glacier. And I think that start in 2008 or 9 was when I responded, and I said, oh, and I did a work, and it meant something to me, and it was a pile of bandages. And I said, but can I just put a pile of bandages and talk about a conflict so large, so far away? And that's when I started to take trips to to Ladakh, in the northern regions of Ladakh.
Which is kind of the Indian side of Tibet, is it?
Yes, right? Yeah. Started to research, and those trips, then I started to make it almost like a yearly trip. So till today, I try my best to sort of go at least once a year to Ladakh for my research. And those trips, the understanding of this particular conflicts almost shaped my practice. And then I started to realize that I want to really focus more on the aspect of war and conflict, in this case the Siachen Glacier, and that sort of shaped my practice to a point where I really then started to decide I really had to focus only on that, because there was so much to chew on, there was so much to talk about, so much to confront, so much to question and critique. So
yeah, I'm very interested in this, because I'm thinking about your generation, and as an Indian citizen, I mean, what experience, direct or indirect, you would have had of war. I know that these low-level conflicts around some unresolved territorial problems, India and Pakistan, India and China, and so on and so forth, and we read about it in the news. And maybe it affects the Jawans and the soldiers who are there, but how does it affect you? And why is it personal for you?
Yeah, I think it starts with this. So when I was traveling to Ladakh, the first trips that I made, I mean, the kind of stories that I got to know of from various people, from civilians to armed forces to officers and soldiers, etc. I think there was something I wanted to talk about, and something that was within me that said, I really have to say something, because I don't agree with something, and I don't think this is how it should be, and this is what I would like to talk about. And some of their stories were not heard of. I mean, we do know of the Siachen Glacier, all the politics behind it, the number of soldiers, etc. But certain stories that I thought were not reaching, and in my own way, I was trying to also get to know of these stories. And I thought, when I was and in my research, and as I was sort of going on and on, I realized there was something that also touched me within. And I thought, I'm here sitting in a very comfortable situation in Mumbai, far from all these conflict zones. And I said, yes, I have to say something. And there was like a calling within yourself to sort of, and the more I started to research, the more I started to get into it, the more I started to understand it. So I would rather say the ununderstanding, and that's also my connection.
And the ununderstanding.
Yeah. I don't understand till today how, why, etc. And that's why, that also keeps me on my toes. And that's the idea. I'm also constantly trying to understand it, or to research it, or to resolve it, or confront it.
And in terms of the field, and I don't know the Indian contemporary art scene, so you're going to help me out on this. I mean, was anybody else working on this, or whether it's in fact artists or writers? I know Arundhati Roy has written about war. I remember the first nuclear explosion that India detonated, and she wrote a very moving essay about that. But are the creative individuals of India responding to things like the wars?
Yeah, I think I mean, various artists do respond in their own ways. Writers, poets, filmmakers do make films, and there has been a sort of, there has been some sort of collective, cultural sort of response. I mean, to point out one artist called Amar Kanwar, who basically is someone I'm very inspired with. I mean, he basically has done various projects, and one of his projects was to look at how land is grabbed in Orissa. It's called the Sovereign Forest, which was shown in various locations and also which traveled to CCA. So yes, I mean, there are artists who sort of are responding to various, I mean, they might not be exactly the Siachen Glacier in this case. I'm sure there are some artists, but I can't pinpoint at this point of time. But yeah, there are various artists responding. I think if not artists, then who? I mean, there has to be some sort of cultural response to all this, I think.
Well, so, okay, you say an understanding, and I'm sure there's quite a bit of modesty that lies behind that expression you use, but having worked for a considerable amount of time on this area, what have you learned? What have you learned about the nature of war, the nature of people, of governments, of states, and have you come to has your work opened up an understanding about this phenomenon that you talk about?
Yeah. I think the day I understood everything, I would have to shut down, and I think I would just call it a day. And I think that is something which I also don't allow myself to, because I think there's so much to be resolved. Each artwork that I do, basically, there's something that I would resolve at some point. But then I've looked at that artwork after 5 years, and I found something that I should look at, and I've reworked it or developed it further, etc. So yeah, I mean, it's really difficult to sort of pinpoint and say, this is what I've learned and this not, and every day is a process. I mean, I'm learning as I go. But yes, it's quite sometimes.
Is that self-directed then? I mean, in terms, to what extent? I mean, this is a really inadequate. To what extent is your work kind of really self-centered or selfish, or not about the communal experience, the collective experience? I mean, do you seek to change people's minds?
It's impossible. I think art will not change the world, but I do have hope that art will bring some sort of experience, some sort of call of some memory that yes, this is what happened at some point of time. I think it's not going to, it won't change. I mean, yes, but I do see that sometimes I have had certain responses to my exhibition from an exhibition that I did in Ladakh itself, which was in the conflict. It was very close to the Siachen, not exactly close, but in the same region, and it was interesting to see what people were responding to this particular work. When I've had this work shown in other parts of the world, I've seen how people have responded, oh, we didn't know about it. And I think just to know about it sometimes is also something quite satisfying for myself, to know that the story basically that someone might not know. For that matter, even in Singapore, when I've been researching on this particular experience of the World War II, to know that there was a women's regiment, many of them don't even know about it. So, of course, I also didn't know at some point, but to also know that some people are aware of it now, I think is already something that I'm interested in. What they do with that information, how will it change them, is not something that I can track, and it's not an education system where I can keep track of them for 10 years or whatever. But I think art is also about just also bringing to notice, the questions, the sort of these memories, and what one does. It's not spoon feeding, it's just telling you that this is what happened, and then you sort of try to engage with it if you want to or not. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to move in the next segment to your current work, which is the conflict that happened in the past and has to do with the Indian National Army, because that was present here in Malaya and in Singapore during the Second World War. Okay, we'll take a short break and we'll be right back.